Good afternoon, dear friends. Yeah, my name is Dmytro Iarovyi. I teach at Kyiv School of Economics, and I am privileged to moderate our panel today, and I hope it will be inspiring and interesting to you. So, without further stealing more time from you, let me invite one by one our scholarship holders because we want to highlight them. And let me begin with Anna Romandash, a fearless Ukrainian journalist with experience of writing her materials from the front line, who did a study on the resilience of media. Yeah. So, thank you, Anna. Dr. Tatiana Cojocari, a researcher and disinformation scholar from Moldova, who's been doing studies about Soviet and post-Soviet nostalgia. Yeah. And Dr. Veronika Solopova, a postdoctoral fellow from the Technical University of Berlin, who's been doing her studies in AI as a means of disinformation and countering disinformation. And Dr. Yehor Brailian, historian and analyst from Detector Media, who was studying Russian disinformation in NATO countries and in the occupied territories of Ukraine. So we will try to leave as much time as possible for Q&A today. Because I know that you've been quite active on the previous sessions. I've seen that. But still, I have few questions from myself to our panelists. I think we will begin with a general one. So, as my former colleague, Dr. Dmytro Iarovyi said, we used to work at the same institute, actually, at some point. So, yeah, he is my former colleague. We are all conscious people, yeah? But that is also a problem, an issue, because we are doing the events, we are doing the gatherings, we are doing the research projects, fact-checking trainings, media and information literacy programs, initiatives. And what I see, and it's not only me who sees that a circle of people who come to these programs, who participate in these programs, are often those who do not actually need that. Because those are people who already know what is the problem and what are the challenges. And so the question about our interventions being tangible remains on the agenda. And what I wanted to ask our scholars, our fellows, in the context of their studies, in the context of their projects, could you please name several, maybe introduce your project, yeah? And name one or several core interventions which can be done in your area, in your field, to reach those people, groups, counter-publics, whatever we call them, who are really vulnerable to information disorders. So I think we will start in the order as we were introducing our panelists. So yeah, if you don't mind, Anna, would you be so kind to begin?
Thank you very much. Boy, do I feel like an imposter being the only one without a doctor's title at this presentation. Thanks again for having me, for letting me work on this research. Yeah, so briefly what I was working on for this particular project. I'm a journalist. I normally write and cover human rights violations and abuses, but I'm also really interested in the way technology can facilitate some of the human rights investigations and some of the investigations generally that we are doing right now in Ukraine linked to the Russian invasion. So I've been looking into the way Ukraine and Ukrainians were responding to the hybrid warfare that Russia has been waging against Ukraine in addition to the actual warfare. So basically looking into ways Ukrainians were mobilizing themselves to respond to information attacks, cyber attacks, and so on. So many of you know that Russia has been very active in the hybrid warfare long before 2022 invasion, long before 2014 invasion. So it's a very good, very efficient, probably the most efficient country, the most efficient player when it comes to hybrid warfare in Europe, at least. In Ukraine, we've seen it for a few decades. And outside of Ukraine, hybrid warfare by Russia has been really active and very efficient, even though a lot of governments in Europe don't want to recognize it. A good example, a very recent from Ukraine, and you've probably heard of it, 2023, December, so almost a year ago, Russians attacked our biggest telecom provider, Kyivstar, which provides telecom communications to around 24 million people, users across Ukraine, and for a whole day, all of the communications by this operator were down, so people couldn't call, couldn't receive text messages, couldn't use internet, and so on. So just imagine 24 million people without communication, where sometimes mobile internet is the only means that they can connect to each other. And this attack on this Ukrainian telecom operator cost at least $95 million, but I'm assuming it should be much more. This is just the initial number that the telecom disclosed. So while there are ongoing cyber warfare, hybrid warfare operations against Ukraine and beyond, there are also a lot of activities and a lot of initiatives that Ukrainians are working on to tackle that. And I'm studying some of the success cases to see how they can be multiplied and scaled across Ukraine, but also across Europe. I believe in the power of decentralized horizontal networks, communities of experts, just like this one in front of me. And some of the examples that are already working in Ukraine that could also be examples of these communities that I study would be the Ukrainian IT army, which is a decentralized network of roughly 100,000 IT professionals that are united in their goal to take down some of the websites, to take down some of the cyber infrastructure of Russia as an answer to the Russian attacks. So basically, these decentralized IT networks have been very successful in basically shutting down websites, but also stealing a lot of crucial and important data for Ukraine. Another example how the IT army has been contributing to Ukraine's response to Russian hybrid warfare, we're using AI-generated tools. You've probably heard that during the start of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine partnered with a lot of AI tools that help identifying people's faces. And this is not a discussion of ethics, because war and ethics are really controversial debate. This is basically just providing you with an example. So Ukrainian IT experts partnered with investigative journalists using the AI tools to be able to identify, put names to the soldiers to the Russian soldiers who were deployed to Ukraine and who were responsible for the occupation of northern parts of Ukraine, so parts around Kyiv region, Bucha, and so on. And they were able to identify name, location, address, age, and so on of every soldier who was stationed in that area to further conduct investigations on who was allegedly committing crimes against civilians in that part of Ukraine. So IT Army's work is really efficient and it's really great. Some of the other tools or communities that I study would be horizontal networks of media organizations, and this is something that could be and should be explored more. For example, partnerships between Ukrainian and German media organizations, German journalists coming into Ukraine and doing cross-border investigations, cross-border reporting. That would not just be a reporting by a German journalist who uses a fixer in Ukraine, a translator in Ukraine, but then initially does his or her work by himself, by herself, independently. This would be a collaboration where equal partners jointly work together, so journalists from Ukraine and Germany contribute to trans-border investigations and publications that are relevant for audience both in Germany and in Ukraine. So we're looking into ways to strengthen this kind of cooperation and facilitate more of this media exchange, civil society exchange, and so on. And other examples would be social media networks. Somebody here already said that they're part-time NAFO expert, basically a Shiba Inu dog on Twitter or X. So this is already an example of how people who are active social media users can use their presence, can use the time that they spend on social media and turn it into something productive when it comes to educating Western audiences about Ukraine and amplifying Ukrainian voices.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I should remark that it's not you who should feel as an imposter, but probably me, because what you are doing, your practical actions are really important for life saving, important for the future. It's not like being a person sitting in a fancy office with a fancy tie, but it's what really does the changes for life. So may I ask for a round of applause for Anna. Thank you. Tatiana.
Hello there. The light actually doesn't help me to see you, but you are there. I'm feeling that. I will build on what you said. Actually, yeah, being a doctor is not so great. Actually, you hate speeches, and you don't really know what the best solutions are. So because you are researching, you are revealing things, and you are helping, other people, decision makers, to make and to take solutions. So it's tough questions to give several actions or solutions. But I'll relate my speech to my work and also to Moldovan case. So probably you all know that on 20th of October we held the EU constitutional referendum, and the majority said yes. Well, this majority actually is not a majority as we expected. We had just 50.36% who said yes to the changes of the constitution for the EU integration, as we expected these yes answers to be even higher, 65%. So it's a sign, I think, it's a signal. And why? Because indeed, as you know, Moldova is facing massive anti-EU disinformation and misinformation campaign. And why I'm saying anti-EU, because this is what we faced this year. A lot of messages targeting European Union, what is European Union, what are bad things about European Union. And it's very hard actually to, to react and to, because we heard here discussions that economical benefit might play a part to counteract it, not always. And when we speak about solution, we usually speak about media literacy, as we heard in previous panel, right? Debunking, more strictly controlled media. Well, these are the good practice, right? But they are not actually so efficient as we saw in practice, as we saw in the Republic of Moldova, and not just in the Republic of Moldova. Why? Because I believe that when speaking about hybrid warfare, and this is what I'm doing also in my research, as Dmytro mentioned, looking a little bit on history, I believe that it's not right to ignore such aspects as culture and cognitive aspects that malign actors are actually weaponizing in order to reach target audience. And we also tend to ignore the link that exists between nostalgia and anti-Western disinformation, especially in Moldova and other countries from post-Soviet space, right? And you see, nostalgia is an incredible force to shape cultures, to shape memories, political memories as well. Hostile actors, what they do, both local and external, because we cannot say just Russia. We also do have in Moldova local actors who are helping actually Russia to spread these messages. They use cultural memory of individuals to cultivate systematical biases towards certain messages. So, you already have there something because of the history, and what they are doing is just serving you the messages, and you are tend to consume because you have this cognitive bias, right? In other terms, people with a specific past, memory, mentality, will be more prone to select and consume media content that might validate or secure their beliefs. And especially it is valid for countries that are in transitions, that are somehow frustrated. So we are asking usually people in the Republic of Moldova, do you think that USSR and the falling of USSR was a good thing or a bad thing? And around 50+%, they're saying that it was a bad thing for their country. And they're also saying that not ordinary people benefited from the fall of the Soviet Union, but politicians and other actors. So what Russia is actually doing is using this nostalgia in communicating, appealing to positive memories, but not as we heard, as in my opinion, not just showing or relating to the fact that you are young or, you know, life was simple. Yeah, it's true. But also using this confrontational rhetoric of Cold War. Yeah, so it creates the idea of enemy about EU, about NATO, and about US. My research shows that in Republic of Moldova, people who still feel emotionally connected to the Soviet Union and regret the fall of the Soviet Union would be more hostile to European integration and more open on consuming Western propaganda. And I'll give you some examples. So in Republic of Moldova, based on our research, national survey, we still have around 30–35% of people who are saying that they will vote for the rebuild of Soviet Union. So if you are comparing this group of people with the group of people who are not Soviet nostalgic or say that they will not totally or they not agree with the rebuild of Soviet Union, you can see that the Soviet nostalgic group tend to support the EU integration process 3 times less than the ones who are not Soviet nostalgic. 50% of Soviet nostalgic tend to blame NATO and US for the Russian war in Ukraine, in comparison just to 18% of non-nostalgic. To sum up, I'm reaching the conclusion. One tangible action, that was the question. It's hard to say, but I believe, and it's my point, that we have to focus our attention on speaking about resilience, hybrid warfare, on the cultural and cognitive aspects as well. To focus more on the content that shapes cultural values, to fill this gap that malign actors are so successfully exploiting because we are lacking the proactivity to lead and make our own narrative so popular. And we actually ignoring, and I'll speak, probably I'll have occasion to come back to this. We ignored for so many years our own history. And now, unfortunately, someone else is weaponizing this. Yeah, not in our advantage. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tatiana.
This works, right? Hi. I kind of also feel a little bit as an imposter because I'm the only, I think, kind of a math techie person on the panel, and I'm also the only Zoomer, I feel like. So, you know, and I'm actually also a Zoomer in German academia, which is quite a journey. I mean, I'm also a female researcher in AI field, which is also obviously very male-dominated. And what I'm going to is actually that the disinformation as a problem really requires from us as a society to mobilize people from all of the different demographics, all of the different age groups, and also have this interdisciplinary approach. And the AI recently really got quite a bad name. Like we got the hype, so we kind of experienced the AI summer, as we call it. But we also, AI is very vilified. But obviously, while it helps amplify the disinformation problem, it also can help us combat it. And basically, this is one of the things I was looking at. While working in the projects with journalists, because obviously all of the projects trying to create AI tools for fact-checking and disinformation resilience, all these involve fact-checkers and journalists, I noticed that there is a lot of also mistrust and also a lot of lack of maybe idea. Okay, how do we really can we really use it? Obviously, it's not only about accuracy, but a bit in general. And there is like part of this problem is also like the fear that AI can take our jobs and stuff, but I think we are quite far from that. So I was looking at the problem from three perspectives. One is the AI regulations, because I think while we moved quite a lot, especially in the European Union, the Digital Service Act and the AI Act, we kind of still don't have some solutions for specific fields like fact-checking. So fact-checkers usually don't really know how AI can be legally integrated into their work, how any kind of problem which can come from automatically produced verification errors, basically how it can then be viewed especially in the context of, for example, in Germany, the diligence obligation, which is imposed on the journalists. And basically, that's one of the things I was looking at, and especially on the local and regional media regulators, which is a great example for Ukraine, which now lacks basically this as a whole, and then obviously also the AI fact-checking kind of regulations, which could be at least guidelines, which could really show the way forward. I was also looking at, so basically conducting interviews between the AI developers working in this field, the fact-checkers and the governmental workers also in various, basically in Germany and in Ukraine, in different units combating disinformation and looking at hybrid threats. And basically one of the things I discovered, especially talking to to my peers in AI field, is the problem of, the AI is a bit bad, but basically, how can we make it better? We need data, right? And obviously, as a society, we are going through a bit this evolution, this discussion, how now we approach the freedom of speech in the context of wanting to defend ourselves as a society from disinformation threats. And the approach of putting data privacy at the center is absolutely important, and I think one of the most important for the 21st century. But at the same time, we as researchers do not receive enough access to the social media data to be able to train our models, to be able to analyze the ongoing info campaigns, and this is a huge limiting factor, and basically this is something I talk about in my paper. And finally, I also, again, as an AI specialist, I was looking a lot at the solutions, and one of the important things is the explainable AI, which I talk a lot, and I mean, it is a hot topic for sure in the tech world, but the idea is that if we really want basically the implement AI into fact-checking, into media monitoring, info campaign monitoring, we really want AI to be explainable, to basically not only just tell us, oh, this is deepfake, but also explain what part of the video was suggestive that there is some manipulation or generation. And this would allow basically then the journalists really use it as a tool to then look at this thing with their own eyes. And I think that's basically one of the central things basically for the and themes for the AI moving forward in this field.
Thank you very much, Veronika. And actually, it means that for AI, this freedom security dilemma, which is universal probably in the information, in the field of information communication, is also topical. Yes, so privacy is important, but still, if we do not have access to the data to be able to train the models efficiently, so how can we counter them? Is that the point? So yeah, despite some of my colleagues stating that freedom and security in information are not a dichotomy, I still believe that it is. I don't know. Yeah, thank you. I'm just wanted to comment. Yehor?
Yes, hello everyone. I am a journalist and historian, and I do analyze Russian propaganda in NATO countries. I work at Detector Media. It's a key Ukrainian watchdog media. We do analyze all what is connected with social media, information security, and in my policy paper I decided to combine German perspective and the perspective of the occupied territories of Ukraine. That's why my policy paper is devoted to Germany in Russian propaganda in the occupied territories of Ukraine. And as Anna mentioned, information warfare is a part of hybrid warfare, and Russia is waging hybrid warfare for decades, not only against the countries of Eastern Partnership, but also NATO countries. And back in the Soviet Union, the West and NATO countries were main evil, and these anti-Western narratives continue to flourish after 1991. And in contemporary Russia, Kremlin is telling to their people that you see these Germans and Anglo-Saxons, they weaponize Europe, they give weapons to Ukraine, so they are bad, so we need to punish them. And actually, all this Russian propaganda is sharing in the occupied territories of Ukraine. It's Crimea and parts of Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia and Kherson Oblast. And after 2014, Russia established its own occupation administration there with so-called ministries. So there are, for example, digital ministries in the occupied territories, and they want to control like internet and social media. And after the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine of 2022, a lot of changes happened in the occupied territories. First of all, the main change was the centralization of internet, because before 2022 there were 3 different internet providers. One was in Crimea, and the other 2 were in Donetsk and in Lugansk. And in 2023, all these 5 occupied territories were united by one company, Miranda Media. And German role in Russian propaganda is actually very important, and Germany, along with the US and Great Britain, are like main villains, and all what is connected with, for example, foreign visits of German politicians, or German military aid to Ukraine, or all what is connected with German foreign policy and German people. Russia is brainwashing local people on the occupied territories. And actually, my key takeaways from my research are following. Like, first of all, we need to have the better coordination about strategic communications regarding the occupied territories of Ukraine. Because right now in Ukraine, we have different state actors, for example, former Ministry of Reintegration of occupied territories of Ukraine. Right now it was transformed into the Ministry of National Unity of Ukraine. We have the Center of National Resilience of Ukraine as a part of Ukrainian MOD, and the Center for National Resilience, they coordinate the partisan movement in the occupied territories of Ukraine, for example, such movements as Yellow Ribbon or similar ones. So first of all, we need the better coordination among the government bodies of Ukraine, and also with civil society, media, and academia. Secondly, we need to have our own agenda, what will be the development of these territories after their liberation from the Russian occupation. And Germany, in this regard, will play a big role in reconstruction activities, in different activities of transitional justice. And actually, the main problem with Russian propaganda is that they want to have a reflexive control over different countries, including Germany. That's why Russians want to impose their own narratives about Ukraine, Ukrainian history, Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian people. And the best way to counter Russian propaganda is not debunking, and media literacy doesn't work. But we need, yes, I'm telling it very openly. And
Thank you.
and we need to have our own narratives. We need to have our own narratives about what Ukrainian victory is, about what Russia is for the European security and German foreign policy in particular, about other topics. And this is actually my second takeaway. And the third takeaway is that we need to have more mutual projects among not only German and Ukrainian journalists, but also among Ukrainian and German scholars, because the key element of Russian propaganda in the West is academia. It's this Sovietology heritage, and we see it in the United States of America, John Mearsheimer, other very nice people, and we see these very nice people here in Europe. So I see a big potential in having such joint projects, and maybe a couple of words like how Russia was used in Germany in the propaganda in the occupied territories. So first of all, Russia was using these so-called people at the referendums. So they were watching, okay, everything was good at referendum in 2014 in Crimea, and also at referendums in 2022 in Kherson Oblast, occupied part of Zaporizhia Oblast, and actually, you know, Putin is a big fan of referendums, maybe, and he is also a big fan, I suppose, of one Austrian artist who also liked referendums a lot. So that's why he decided to have a lot of referendums. And German people, they were manipulated by Russia, and Russia uses German nationals in order to say, you see, these international observers at our elections, referendums, well, these results are legal, almost 100%. So this is the first way of how Russia was manipulating German people, and secondly, that sanctions doesn't work, and we need to have negotiations, and Ukraine doesn't want to have them. So, and well, there are some German people who help this Russian propaganda. For example, like Alexander Arar, he's one of co-founders of German-Russian Economic Council, something like that. So we need to have more joint projects about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Igor. And thank you for spilling the inconvenient truth. You will not be awarded Nobel Prize for that, like Albert Gore did. So, but I just want the colleagues to realize that it does not render our work in media and information literacy useless. No, it just means, that the word that you said about media and information literacy and that they do not work, just means that we need to be focused. Yeah. And we need to unite. And with this, I have another. I'm coming to another question to you. I hope that the questions from you will be more optimistic. And I'm a bit taking a role of devil's advocate, as I usually do. And then my kid asks me, "Dad, why people do not like you?" Like, okay, yeah, I will explain him later. But the axis of evil countries are uniting, we clearly see them. We see them doing the exchange in technologies. We see them using each other platforms for making political changes. If I can mention Romania here, and the case with the presidential election on the Chinese platform of TikTok, but used probably not by Chinese government, but still by their allies. Countries of the European Union, countries of the global West, sometimes are also, well, I would not say that they are participating in the axis of evil. No, Mr. Orban, no, Mr. Fico. You are not, probably, but you are not doing enough. yeah, if modestly saying that, to counter this axis of evil. And I do not mean that we will lose this war and that we are losing it, but it will be hard. And it's not a Hollywood blockbuster where the happy ending is guaranteed because you're only fight on the good side. So what, to your opinion, yeah, just briefly, because I still want to have more time for questions and for you guys. So just 1 minute or 2 minutes. What are the points of cooperation, cross-border, inter-country cooperation between our countries? What can we do together? How can we learn on each other's experience to be able to be more efficient? Yeah, not only for the reports, for our grant givers, but for the action.
I'll try to be brief. There's a study by The Economist. They looked into how people respond to the Russian-Ukrainian war and who do they actually support, if they support any party. So globally, Ukraine has more support. It's around 55% of the global population. I don't know the methodology of The Economist, but this is what they found. So around 55% support Ukraine, around 25% support Russia. And it's closely aligned with whatever countries or the governments have good relations with Russia, these countries also tend to have more pro-Russian sentiments. But not always so. So in countries where there's free media, where there is a vibrant civic sector, where you can have a lot of alternative information, sometimes there are discrepancies or differences between how public perceive things and what the government says. An example is Brazil, where the government tends to be neutral to more pro-Russian, and the public is much more pro-Ukrainian. This shows that even when the governments don't do enough, or when they actually interfere or have a negative influence in terms of perception or narratives, access to independent information, access to networks, access to a lot of alternative views, which are true, can be very beneficial for the public. And this brings me to my answer. In Ukraine, we have a lot of really great initiatives which bring writers to the country. So writers from different countries in Latin America, in Africa, and so on, they are invited by Ukrainian Pen. And they're basically shown around, shown to a lot of liberated territories. They are meeting with a lot of Ukrainian people and so on. The same for journalists. And when they come back to their countries in the global south, but also in Western Europe and so on, they write about it. And these are the influencers for the intellectuals, let's say, or influencers for the policymakers, hopefully. And their voices do matter. And this is one of those examples where this horizontal mobilization, where local organizations in Ukraine are able to contribute to this cultural diplomacy, which in turn leads to some changes in the perceptions and perspectives on Ukraine. I believe what governments can do is that if they cannot help, they at least should not interfere with what the independent organizations are doing in Ukraine or outside of Ukraine, because I have seen also a lot of government interference. So for example, where journalists would be prevented from going into Ukraine, where there would be limitations on their travels, capacities, and so on. This has happened quite a lot. But what governments can do is basically provide more opportunities, provide more platforms for this exchange and collaboration. There's a lot of funding right now from the EU on this matter, but there could be more proactive stance of individual governments.
Yeah, I will continue actually your thoughts, because I'm thinking somehow in a similar way. When we're speaking about how to make our society more resilient, we are usually and very often speak about making our society more resilient, right? But how you can make, or how one can make our society resilient if people don't have trust in institutions? Yeah, going back to the whole society approach, let's involve all the parties in our society, and that will be more resilient. But in the Republic of Moldova and other societies where we have like high level of polarization, we don't have trust in our government. A part of society believes that this government is not representing, and then we are tending to put labels. This media is pro-European, yeah, this media is pro-governmental, the other media is anti-European or anti-government. So there is like a huge barrier, echo chambers between people. It's very hard to build resilience. It's even harder to involve all parties, government, civil society, media, international actor to work together. What I think might be the solution is actually to try and make people believe in their own forces, and we had a previous panel speaking about give more agency to people and believe that people can have agency. And in Moldova, we are having a very bad level. So I'll just read several numbers. Just 30% of people believe that they can influence important decisions from their community, and 20% believe that they can do that on the national level. So this is why I think that the trust-building process in our society should be not from top-down, but from bottom-up. And I believe that we need more local initiative, more support for individual stories, making these stories part of our daily media consumption, making these success stories to spread in our society so people can see examples and can learn from these examples. And maybe this level of like, the person, I have agency, I can change something, and just the very last idea. And I think here international actors can play a really key role to provide support for local entrepreneurs, cultural initiatives, and like events like this, mixing art with research, writers, as you mentioned, to expand really these individual stories from country to country. And yes, Ukraine is a very great idea because we remember in Moldova a Kyiv story where civil society changed a lot of things, and we need these stories to be more present in our daily life. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana. In fact, I would totally agree that this principle, small people, what can we do, has killed a lot of people and has killed a lot of ideas. And that's why, for instance, in Ukraine, decentralization reform, which gave a lot of authority to people in the local communities, was so important for their resilience. But it's not our topic, yeah? But it's regarding what you just said, it's a very important idea. Thank you.
I also wanted to follow up on that. For sure, something we need to do in this post-truth times is basically to fund the institutions which create truths. This is not my idea, it's Timothy Snyder's, whom I'm a huge fangirl, to be honest, but the idea that, so investigative journalists, fact-checkers, all of the research institutions which work on this topic, this is something we really need to look into. Something I also, as a member of German academia and like European Union academia, I noticed that, for example, when you apply for funding and then you want to bring Ukrainian partners or any kind of European Union's association partners, you don't really have tools actually to get them any funding. This is one of the problems I see. And on the other hand, it's more interpersonal. So when I say someone that, like some PIs that I want to, for example, I have great connections in Ukraine, I can bring some fact checkers, some researchers. I feel like there is, again, a bit of this myth of wise nation that like, oh, we journalists actually, we Germans have a long journalist tradition, we kind of know better. And this really, for me, puts a bit of the brakes on the idea of more research internships and like exchanges, for example, for European Union researchers to go to Ukraine, to go to Balkans, to go to Georgia, to Moldova, and actually look at how disinformation works in this particular info spaces. And I think on the one hand, and I mean, vice versa. So also obviously bringing researchers from this member associative and whatever states basically also there, because it's not only about oh, let's get some funding to poor country researchers, but I think it's a huge benefit for European Union to reinforce the information resilience of their prospective member states, so that the future members of European Union are not like some, and then also basically to learn all of this variety and diversity of the forms this information can take. And one of the ideas basically I was also looking at is a kind of the European Association for Social Media Research, which could encompass many other phenomena, but also obviously focus on disinformation research, and basically which would allow easier access to the vetted members, basically to easier access to social media data, easier possibility to also exchange this data, which is now absolutely impossible, which is crazy because in science we need reproducibility rule, so that you could share your data with basically other researchers and they could reproduce this, and this is not possible nowadays, even through research APIs of YouTube, for example, TikTok, Metas. So this is impossible now, and basically through this kind of association we could bring actually, and this kind of a regulated, a controlled deregulation of access to social media data. We could also bring many researchers from all over the world to Europe, bring projects, bring cooperations, and of course it should always include the possibility for the Eastern European, for example, states to be also active part of it, because we are those who have lived through the consequences of disinformation campaigns in real life and death situations, and our voice should be heard.
Thank you.
I would say that we need to do two things better. First of all is networking, because Russia, China, North Korea and Iran, these countries are really a network of new access countries, and they have different national interests, and North Korea is a vassal country of China, Russia is a vassal country of China, Iran have some paramilitary forces in the Middle East, so yeah, and Russia is considering Iran as their vassal state, so something like that. And but they have in common this anti-Western foreign policy approach. So they want to humiliate West, and they want to make everything possible to defeat the West. And that's why we need to be more united, because all what we have right now, the Russian-Ukrainian war, the situation in the Middle East, the Gaza war, situation around Taiwan, the entry of North Korean forces in the war at the side of Russia. So it's all interconnected development. So that's why we need to be more united. And the second thing is that we need to have an honest dialogue between the government and the people, because Russia is not, going to some information desert, but they emphasize and they empower already existing divisions inside the societies, and these divisions could be on different topics, from migration to, I don't know, to other topics. And that's why Russia is trying to empower those divisions, and in this way to manipulate the public opinion of people and imposing their narratives of Ukraine and other countries.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, dear panelists and dear colleagues. What are your questions, comments, complaints?
Thank you so much for this interesting discussion. I think everyone agrees, of course, Russian propaganda is a huge problem. But especially if you look now in East Germany, we talked about nostalgia, ostalgie. Some politicians try to say, oh, I take this because then I get more percents. Yes, so we have the truth on the one hand and the politicians on the other hand. What to do?
Is it a question to somebody particularly, or whoever
no.
wants to
No.
comment?
No.
Okay, who would like to comment? Yeah, yeah.
I will start and then I will let my colleagues also to complete. Yeah, it's a valid question, but my question to your question is: are we doing enough to inform people? Like, I mean, nostalgia is not just about remembering things; it's also about forgetting things, right? And what some actors are doing. Yeah, thank you. And what we are not doing, they're like, as I said, weaponizing the messages that they want. And I don't believe that we as a society, and I don't know how it's the situation is in German, but I'm referring to my society, we are not doing enough speaking about our history, speaking about all the sides of history. And that's why some politicians are so cunningly, successfully weaponizing these stories. And yeah, and we can also recognize that some of other politicians, they are not doing their job as they're supposed to do. And we have, as I mentioned, weak institutions. We have even weaker politicians. We don't have charismatic politicians. And this is a huge problem of our society, unfortunately, of liberal and democracy. Yeah, that's true. What to do to organize more events, to discuss more about that, to do grassroots activities, as we in Moldova started to do, to go village from village and talk with small communities, because we try to use social media and we cannot fight with algorithms. We are reaching just the audience that is already on our side, so we decided that we have to go back in time and start to do this grassroots movement, going and speaking with the people in the field, organizing museums, organizing events, to talk about our past, what we want to, and have a narrative, how we want to present our story, actually, our history. This is at least some ideas that I have, but I'm sure that my colleagues can add on that.
You wanted to comment? Yeah, Anna, please.
Well, just a quick comment, I think. It's similar. Like, I was lucky enough never to see Soviet reality. I was born when Ukraine already regained independence. But when my dad tells me about Soviet life, I just, it's very bizarre for me that people would be nostalgic about it, because life back then was just crap. He would tell me things like, and I'm not talking about gulags or mass exterminations even, I'm just talking about like everyday life. My dad would go to school as a middle schooler, and after school he would go straight to the store to wait in line so he could buy sausage and milk and butter because they were all in deficit. And it's true, everybody had a job and everybody had money that were worth nothing because you couldn't spend it on anything. And the fact that there's still a disparity between Eastern Germany and Western Germany, it's a sad thing. It's difficult for the country, but it just shows you how much better the life was in Western Germany in comparison to Eastern Germany, which was the most developed part of USSR and Eastern Bloc altogether. So you can see how much worse life was, the farther east you would go. I think a way to address that would actually be emphasizing on the good things that there are in the West. So nostalgia, it's using a lot of things like, maybe life wasn't great, but you were young, and you had a happy time in Eastern Germany. But also remember some of the things that were crappy that you don't appreciate right now, but you have them and you don't even understand how much your life is easier or better, and so on and so on. So, for people who say, I don't care about freedom and whatever benefits that I'm getting here now living in independent democratic Germany, because when I was young, even without freedom, I had this. So basically the counter messaging should be, if you give up on your freedom so much for the material things or for some sort of a falsified nostalgia, soon you will not have either freedom or the material things that you were so happy about 50, 40 years ago.
Thank you, Anna. So, yeah.
Maybe we can collect also 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, I think we can collect the questions, but yeah, will you
Yeah,
begin?
I can start and then
Yeah.
we'll continue collection. Natalia Novakova, Civil Society Forum. Thank you for very insightful discussion, and I will be again referring to the question of nostalgia and the idea of creating our own narratives. I'm just wondering how much has there been an attempt to deconstruct what nostalgia consists of? And are there elements which we can use for promotion of what we believe Europe is or should be, or Western values are or should be? Because I also wonder how much feelings is stronger thing than facts. Maybe there are some feelings which we can use for promotion of Europe as well inside of that nostalgia. Like talking about social values, for example, which Germany is a social state. Maybe it protects its citizens more than ephemeral vision of Soviet Union is. So that's just...
Okay, yeah. Other questions?
Hello, my name is Anastasia. I'm an activist in Fridays for Future Ukraine. So I have a question. I heard it from some German journalists when asking about, when talking about Russian misinformation propaganda, and they they do something. Of course, they try and to be objective, so to say, which is often listening, hearing both sides. And then I talk about the sense of urgency, and they just don't get it, and they say we do what we can, and it's it's so frustrating to hear, because I get the feeling they look at me, and probably many people in the West look at us Ukrainians as small children. They see a monster under the bed, or as we say in Ukrainian, babaika, the mythical creature that takes naughty children away. And yeah, it's the question is, what is your suggestion? What should be done more, maybe on the state, the governmental level? I don't know, the journalists as a group, as a group of the society, so to say, to counter this disinformation propaganda, not just on the individual level, on the level of some Ukrainian organizations and pro-Ukrainian activists. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and 2 more questions which we had there, and yeah, I see you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for all your work and for the panel. It's very interesting, and as a German I have to say, we need so much more of this. I feel like we are a bunch of children being very unaware of what's really happening, and the amount of aggression we are really feeling. And that's also part of my question, as fast as I feel that it's very important to create your own narratives, I'm also thinking about how much more do we need to be aware of Russia as being the enemy? And that's also my question. I'm working in marketing, and I'm creating a positive image as one aspect, but you can also create, portray Russia as the enemy. And I think my question is, do you think that it's something which could be worth considering, to be much more open about, calling Russia the enemy it is? Do you think it's effective? I'm not sure. We are quite there yet. So, sorry, it's not a very clear message, very clear question. But we don't have to go as far as McCarthy in the US in the 1950s, maybe. But yeah, that's my question. I hope I can get some sort of an answer. Thanks.
Nobody will be responding. I will try. Yeah, and 1 more question here.
Ivan Kuritson, volunteering group Vilna DEO, Hamburg, Germany. You mentioned the development of horizontal networking in local communities, but are you sure that it really works against the Russian narratives and Russian propaganda? There is no contradiction between these things. You know, for example, Hungary was the major recipient of EU funding since 2004. Not only investments, not only to the technical infrastructure, but also to the development of the horizontal networks in the country or in border areas of Hungary as a part of cross-border cooperation. And it is quite developed, such networking in local communities there, but for those people it's still okay that Russians kill Ukrainians. Party Fidesz was comfortably re-elected on May 2022. In France, it's much more developed. 40% still voted for the pro-Russian candidate, and in the United States, with much more developed horizontal networks, you know the results of elections. So, does it really works in this case?
Thank you. And I think we will still 10 minutes from the lunch break, and we have one more question. If you can, yeah, be brief. Two more questions. Oh my God.
Or should we do
10 minutes? 7 minutes? Oh my God, we will have only 7 minutes.
Okay.
Let's proceed with responding, okay? Okay, very short. Two short questions.
I have a very short question. Natalia Prigornitska from Open Platform. From scientific perspective, what is the most, I don't know if it's possible to answer, but what is the most effective way to counteract disinformation?
May I respond? Produce your own. Develop your strategic narrative. And because there is no vacuum, in the nature. So if you're trying to debunk disinformation without providing relevant information, it's nonsense. It will not work. And you cannot just take some guy who will come to the tribune and say like, please trust our United Marathon. Yeah, you need to build the trust with the actions, and that's here the responsibility of politicians is. Yeah, it's not this combating disinformation cannot be done only by informations in the information field. It needs to be aligned with the political actions. That's where we face the most of the problems. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I also have. Hi, my name is Yehor Brailian. I have a question also regarding anti-Western narratives. Do you really think it's just Russian propaganda, or do you also think people think about what happened in Iraq and other things that happened, what the US did, and just going by doing things to other countries, assassinating leaders and so on? You don't think that it's also people questioning also Western society and Western politics? This is my question, and I have a comment to East Germany. Actually, East Germany, it's a little bit more difficult because the reunification went terribly wrong because there were Western people coming to East Germany, replacing them, pushing them out, privatizing everything, and 1 million people lost their jobs. So I don't think it's so easy to say, look at East Germany. I think this is also a failure towards the Western German government at that time. It went terribly wrong because considering Berlin has a really good, for example, kindergarten. Sorry? Well, it depends.
Okay, thank you. And
it depends. Like, I don't know. Eastern Germans were not so happy losing their jobs. I don't know.
So I actually wanted to answer regarding what we need to do and anti-Western propaganda. So what we need to do right now is to understand that Russians have their imperial mindset. So, and it's not like Putin's war. It's Russians' war against Ukraine. And Russians are good in manipulating, like saying, yeah, it's all Putin's fault. Like, Putin is bad, Putin is really very bad, but we, so-called Russians, so-called liberal, so-called opposition, we are thinking about a bright future of Russia. And this is people who live in Germany, who live in the West, and who are saying, well, we live outside of Russia, but we will be capable of changing it. But how is it possible to change the last empire in Eurasia? How is it possible? And regarding the West, yes, Russia is using this anti-colonial narrative, and we need to decolonize the knowledge. And when we compare, for example, Western countries, the US, Great Britain, France, Germany, the Netherlands, yes, they are all saying, yes, we were doing bad things in the past, and we recognize the genocides in the Global South countries. And Russia hasn't done that, comparing with the Western countries. And this is the main problem, because we still, people in the West still consider Russia as a big power with which they need to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other remarks, colleagues?
We could go in rounds again.
Let's go.
I think it's obviously a huge problem what to do from a sense of, on the one hand, what I see with recent elections, especially, it feels like the Western society is not as terrified as it should be. On the other hand, if they would be terrified as they should be, they would probably vote the same, because then people are terrified, they are searching for easy answers to the very complicated questions, so they are choosing populists. And this is something we see. So I personally know that German government is actually analyzing basically the situation, for example, with medical facilities, if they have enough for the war, if it comes, right? So basically the government tries to do its job, but also do it so that people don't think about it too much of the possibility and don't get panicked. But on the other hand, as a person who lived in Germany for 4 years, I know that there is still a lot of, so it's still about this problem that people are not as terrified as they probably should, or don't realize something. So so often I would get a bit I don't know, annoyed when I hear out of nowhere some very obvious Moscow accent in public here in Berlin. And then my colleagues from my university would be like, why are you reacting like that? It's just, they are not responsible for what just one guy decided to do. And I'm like, oh my God. You are working with me for so many months, and you still tell me that. And you are like an intellectual, like a PhD, and so on. It's crazy. So like, what do we expect in general? But also one thing about the balanced point of view. I think it's still very present, although we are kind of moving from it, right? So it was very present in 2014. Then the big American news outlets, big German news outlets would put this balanced idea. So basically, the opinion of Russian side and the Ukrainian side. I think it kind of transformed a bit. Obviously, it's a very, very dangerous practice when we are talking about lies and on the other side, like emotional truth, right? So basically, this is very, very dangerous practice. But basically, how it looks like now, if we look at the case with Ohmandit, I'm finishing. Sorry. Anyway, so basically now, for example, Reuters would write that, the oncology hospital was bombed in Kyiv, and children's hospital, and basically Reuters would write first, apparently, maybe, according to Ukrainian side, we are not sure, and then they would edit it like in a day. How many people do you think reread the same article afterwards? They already read it and already made up their opinion about how unclear things are. So I think now it's basically, we kind of evolved, but not fully.
We don't have time, so there are so many questions. There are so many questions. We need another hour to discuss all of them. But I'll pick several. I mean, I like the question about Hungary. I think it's a really interesting example. But like what one of our Swedish colleagues told me in Moldova, you cannot promote and wash the reputation of European Union inside Moldova. No matter how hard you're trying, European Union also have to do something. And speaking about Hungary, yeah, you're right, but let's remember that while we had what we had in Hungary, Germany was doing business with Hungary, right? Tolerating somehow this discourse. So it's it's also something that we have to pay attention and to admit our mistakes that we are doing. And how to fight disinformation? It's a really great question, but we don't have answers because answers are different country to country. How to fight disinformation? Maybe to acknowledge, first of all, our vulnerabilities, because Russia knows our vulnerabilities better than we do our vulnerabilities, right? And then what to do next? Let's engage with people who we usually like to put labels on. They believe Russian disinformation. Oh, they are not so smart. Let's not talk. No, let's have a dialogue and engage with different sides, right? And speaking about Soviet nostalgia and if we can pick something about social values and the European Union, I think it's, again, it has to be related to national context. And I'll give you an example of Romania and Moldova. In Romania, even if they have this socialist nostalgia, and now we have a candidate who is supported by Russia, he almost likely will fall, because Romania for many years was told that Russia is enemy, and this is linked to the question about enemy. Should we portray Russia as enemy? Yes, we should do. If Russia is an enemy, then we have to say that Russia is an enemy.